Okay, so thank you very much, Carol, for meeting with us today. We're delighted to see you here and talk about your experiences back in the day there. So
I'm very happy to be here. Thank you.
Fantastic. So the first question, I have a series of questions. The first one is really, can you describe the push and pull factors that sort of brought you and your family here to the Slocan Valley?
We, as a group, 5 of us adults living in Northern California with our 7 children. They weren't all, I mean, they were kids of the various families as we all came together. We had been sharing with each other about wanting to live in a more natural environment, more wilderness, or at least rural. We were very interested in organic farming and gardening and raising animals. Michael and Joan had already done a lot of building a farm when we first met them. And Joan was a consummate baker and preserved things and went, I don't know what it's called now, but kind of foresting, you know, where you just find things in the forest. We did a lot of that through her instruction. She was very helpful. And we met her because she and Michael were friends of a very good friend of ours, Joan Bishop. And so Eric and I and Joan Bishop went out to Sebastopol to meet with them, and when we just super hit it off. And we had tried finding groups that would be interested, we thought would be interested, but as we met with them, we found out they wanted more of a city communal situation. They wanted to be able to share equipment, you know, and that was not our plan. We wanted to raise our children in common, and we wanted to work together and create something heartfelt. So we ended up living together there in Northern California. They came to live at Eric's place, and I came to live at Eric's place. So we were able to do a kind of a mock experience of being with each other for a long period of time, a whole year. And during that year, it became much more clear that we would want to immigrate, that we would want to live together. But around the same time, we met Bill Locks, who was from up in Fauquier. He's a batik artist, and he and David Orcutt, we met them, and they said we were having difficulty finding a place that we could afford. So they said, well, why didn't you come up to British Columbia? And actually David said, I have land. We're kind of, I think we're not doing so well as a community now, and we might want to sell the land, and so there might be a place right there for you. And we got very excited, and some of the group were able to come up and see what was there. And then it turned out when we actually were immigrating and coming here, it fell through, which was very disappointing, but that did not stop us. And part of our intent was to have a place that was large enough that we would be able to add more people so that it would be more viable, but also we felt that it was a much better way for people to live so that they weren't isolated and lonely. And as they got older, we were pretty young. I was 27. Everybody else in the group was older than me. They were 37, mostly in their 30s. And then the young people were teenagers and quite a bit younger. Ethan was quite small. I remember Ethan was Joan and Michael's little boy, and Heather was still maybe 3-4 years old. And immigration allowed us, finally all of us, to come. And I think part of Canada was that we thought Canada was a much more loving country. maybe could get in trouble for saying that. But anyway, it was, at the time particularly, it was, we didn't appreciate the policies of the US. And I would say that we weren't technically draft dodgers. None of us were in that age group. I mean, they weren't going to draft me. And Eric was 37 and had a family and so on. So that wasn't our primary interest. We believed in living back to the land. Yeah. That's a long answer. I'm trying not to be too long.
No, that's
Okay.
fantastic.
Okay.
No, long answers are good. Could I ask about how the new family commune was organised, and how did you make decisions, deal with any disagreements that you may have had? How was the labour divided up? Were there set male and female roles? And what was your role? Also about what skills you may have learned when you were on the commune.
That's a good one. Yeah, that's a really, we could just do the whole hour on that question. We were, well, as I said, we're a somewhat older group, and so we were very, we thought about things a lot, and we wrote things down a lot, and we organized ourselves a lot. So when the decision was made that we were going to create the new family, we thought we would create it. We didn't think in terms of it being a society. We didn't know how that worked up here in BC, but we wanted it to be very structured and legal, and we wanted people, each person, to choose what job they felt they would be most have the most ability to do. And so we literally signed up for, like Eric signed up as the builder, and Michael was in charge of taking care of the garden. So he was in charge of the garden because he'd been a gardener already on his place. And Joan and I, yes, it was rather male-female. Joan and I took care of the kids. We were both very good at that. And we also did a lot of baking. We did huge cooking. It was for 12 people. For us, that was a lot. And gradually, as more people arrived and came, it was sometimes 20 around the round table. But, and I think this was significant, the women, we all worked together on the project. So when Joan would be taking care of the kids at home at the little house we rented, I would be working on doing the shakes like I showed you. I'd help with putting the A-frames up and hold the A-frame in place. And so all the building was done mutually, both men and women in the group. And I learned more in that first year than I ever learned in school. And I really noticed it. Toward the end of that year, I thought, I'm a different person. I haven't even bothered to look at myself in a mirror because that nothing mattered except doing things together, making things happen. And I was very excited about it. I just felt like I learned how to milk a cow. I learned how to grow things in the garden. I learned how to make shakes. I learned how to use a hammer, although I was not very good at the beginning. But I was totally willing to learn, just keep learning. It was thrilling, actually. And pretty soon we had a A-frame, and then we had a second A-frame. Then pretty soon we had 5 A-frames, so that everybody would have their own bedroom. It was really important to us that we each be understood to be individuals. And if people wanted to, be together, of course, that was fine. But it was important that they have a space for themselves to study, to rest, whatever they needed. And that's why we made that many A-frames. I'm sure you asked me something more. I've forgotten what you asked.
Disagreements?
Disagreements. Okay, we had meetings once a week that everybody had to attend. but everybody wanted to. I mean, it was a chance to get together after dinner and talk about any problems they were having. Maybe something like, well, I want to buy things that we're not buying, because we had a very strict budget at first. Eric had brought money into the group. Michael and Joan brought money. I brought very little money. Joan Bishop came the following year. She came early in the following year. So we were starting with a pretty minimal. And we bought the land from Arvid and Yvette. And it was a very reasonable. They were, bless their hearts. I mean, very reasonable. Tramped around on the property and said, this is what we want. And then my brother helped us buy the other 160 acres out of an inheritance, that small inheritance that would come. He just let us know ahead of time. He said, you can use this now and pay me back later, right? And that meant we got 200 acres, which set us up for the possibility of more people coming if they wanted to. And we thought that, so back to disagreements. In those meetings, I remember being worried because people would be upset sometimes. But every time we worked things out during those first 2 or 3 years. And then there was a point where there wasn't a disagreement, but I don't know whether I should keep that private, but anyway, part of the family did leave. It was very, very sad for us. And we didn't know if we did something wrong. You know, we just tried to figure out what had happened. But other people came and we carried on. So by that time, Nancy was living with us as well, and her husband, Joel, who then had a great deal to do with the Velican Hole. He was extremely helpful with that whole process. So I think we ended up being very creative, but we also had various skills. Joan Bishop had been a teacher, and I had been trained a lot in communication skills with my brother. And Joan and Michael were very kind and very, you asked the question on the page, something about spiritualism. I think we were a very spiritual group, but not spiritualist. They're kind of clearly different. In other words, we each had a way of seeing our relationship to the larger wisdom that's available in the world. And we didn't argue about that. The things we might have argued about was, I remember one time Joan Bishop wanted cornstarch, and we were really not going for cornstarch at the time. It's a real funny thing. Sorry, Joan, but she's passed away now, but I'm sure she forgave us. Little things, you know, until maybe there was a big thing, and I'm not even sure what. But they were important meetings, and obviously we were stretched to our limit. The way that we treat children was extremely important. So things about the kids might show up once in a while and had to be resolved. So children should be treated with extreme fairness and kindness and respect. That was a very important piece. And we were teaching the kids at home. I mean, there was the Velican Hole, but that was later. When we first began, we just did all kinds of studies with them, and they were great kids.
And so you had frames, you had a garden there?
Oh, we had a 1/4-acre garden that I've got the photos show, at least one photo shows the garden. It was a big circle. I think originally Arvid and Yvette must have done the garden in that space. And then we put a fence all around it to keep the bears out, which actually didn't work that well because they came in anyway, especially if you left the gate open. But we had French intensive. Do you know French intensive at all? It was done in big half or quarter circles all around a central, what we called Toad Hall, in the middle, which was where the sprinkler was. And in between these big 4-foot beds that were kind of curved, there were paths. So you never walked in the bed. And they went around, it got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and way out at the edges of the garden, I ended up becoming the gardener, so I feel this very strongly. Talking about it's very touching. Around the whole fence line were raspberries. So just surrounded by raspberries. That's why the bears were interested. Yes, we did a lot of gardening. It was difficult gardening because we were up at 2,400. It was high elevation there. And so we had a growing season from June 10th to September 10th. And it might have been for some of the crops, it was July 10th to September 10th. It's very short. But we did manage to get tomatoes if we picked them and put them in the upstairs of the A-frame to ripen. And then we started meeting the Doukhobors, and they taught us everything they could. That's a different question, but they were a huge influence on us. And when we first got here, they were very generous. They gave us all kinds of things to make it through that first winter. And they really believed in us. Whereas, as you put it, some of the people who'd lived there for a long time, let's put it that way, they really didn't believe in us. We found out later that they figured we would leave in the winter. It'd be too much for us. And it was a very, very tough winter, that 1968. You weren't probably here, but anyway.
What were the challenges of that winter then? What was
6 feet of snow and 40 below. Yeah. We were so cold that we were still building outside. We continued building even in the winter, because what else are you going to do? But also because we wanted more A-frames, so everybody would have plenty of space. And I remember putting a nail in my mouth accidentally, and that was not a good idea. It just froze to my lip. Oh yeah. But we'd work for maybe 20 minutes outside and then go back in, warm up, have tea, go back out. We weren't mad about it either, at least I wasn't. I thought, well, it's good, keeps us moving. The kids sometimes would come out. I remember once, one of the kids was standing in the snow with bare feet. We were, no, back inside. We used to read a lot of stories to the kids. Every night was stories.
And you had horses?
We had a Clydesdale Percheron horse named Rowdy, and he came up in February of '69. Joan Bishop went and found him and brought him up. I thought he was very beautiful and scary. He was so tall. He was a really big horse. But we also had Bossy, the first cow we had. She was a Guernsey. And then later we got a Jersey cow as well. And that's how we learned to milk the cow, which we did every day, every morning, every night.
Did you sell any of the milk, or was it just
No,
really
it was just for us. We made, I remember one year we made 80 pounds of cheese. That, of course, the Doukhobors had taught us how to make cheese and cottage cheese and their form of kefir, which was delicious, and they believed in it very strongly. And we used to make, I know this might sound odd, but anyway, the kids loved the bread, and Joan Smith had the most astounding bread recipe that she taught me. That was a very important part of our time together. And we would do 4 loaves of bread a day in the big McClary, one of those big McClary wood stoves. Somebody'd be chopping wood, and everybody in the group would grind flour. We had red, what are they called? Red wheat, from Alberta. And we would make flour every day, so there was always enough flour to make bread that day. We were very well fed. I mean, kind of the same, but same food.
And you had no power, did you? Or did you have any?
No, we had no power. It seems very strange now. Yeah. When we did finally get propane. And when we built the big house, which was in the early in the 70s, we had a generator. But we never did get power up there until property was sold. Mm-hmm. We had a battery radio. You know, we could listen to music, but we made our own music. Joan Bishop and Joan Smith were fabulous musicians, and they had, Joan Bishop had a Martin guitar, and Joan Smith had a banjo, and they'd play music at night, and on the weekends we played music all the time. The kids learned. Wow, I forgot to bring the music book. That's really a shame. It was beautiful, tooled, and it was this thick, filled with music. I don't know if he would have used it, but anyway.
That's great. And so did you have strong connections with, people from other communes and Bachelorlanders, if you will? Did those come in and maybe have an evening together, or were there events going on?
Not at the beginning, but we met the Doukhobors at the beginning and spent so much time with them. After a couple of years, some people began arriving in the valley. Early 70s, I think Pat and Dan Armstrong had arrived around that time. And we were just gradually getting to know people who maybe had a similar viewpoint, Couple others, one of them you mentioned earlier, she's a nurse. For some reason I can't remember her name right now, but it took a while. It must have been 3 or 4 years before we got to know that. You mean people, not people who lived there, but people who came.
Yeah. People from came to the Valley of the Influx, people who came. Mm-hmm. Did you know some of the music scene? And
we knew Brain Damage very much, and we knew the Pied Pumpkin and Pied Pear. As a matter of fact, they'd come up to our place and play music. That was a fabulous time. And they used to come to the Vatican Hall, and we'd go dancing at the Vatican Hall. That's some of the happiest.
Yeah, it seemed to have sort of brought the community together, the Vatican Hall, in many ways.
It was really important, because up till then we were mostly ourselves, and every once in a while you'd meet somebody at Joan's store, right? But there was no place to gather, and there was no restaurant. And finally, there was Robert's restaurant, and Barry, Glennis's daughter, came up and lived with us from Robert's. Yeah. The people we were meeting really were extremely helpful. I mean, we'd just be sharing back and forth. There was a place here in Nelson, Martin Farm, the Bruce and Ken Martin had a place, and they came up to find out how to do cheese and what to do about milk I remember they visited us. We knew them really well. They were very special people.
Okay, that's great. And you mentioned the connection with the Doukhobors there, and there was connections as well with the Quakers in Argenta.
Yes, but more subtle. Felt their influence because of their way of handling the world and how their way of seeing the world and their peaceful ways. We really appreciated them, but I don't remember anybody in particular from there. I do remember, and Nancy probably told you already, about how she and Joel ended up coming to Swami Radha at the ashram, and she said to them, "I think you should go see the new family," which was really funny. So they drove up in their Volkswagen and eventually came back.
That's cool. And can you tell us about any opposition you may have faced here from the local population that was here? Any examples that you had? And we've heard some stories about even the D Squad and.
The D Squad came to visit us all the time.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh yeah, scared me to death.
What were they doing?
They wanted to see if we had any drugs, and we did not. We were really strong about that. After all, we come across the border. We didn't want to risk our immigration status, etc. We were not citizens yet, though we later became citizens. But they, after the first couple of times they came up, boy, I'd make my hair stand on end and be like, "Oh, the D Squad's here." They were worried about us and drugs, but they were also worried that we were influenced by the Doukhobors, and that maybe we were going to be, I don't know, burning our houses. And we just saw the Doukhobors as people who were trying to protect their own freedoms. And so we did like them, but we weren't going to do violent things like them. So the the D Squad decided we were safe. And it may have taken 2 or 3 times, but we were up the top of the hill, and we weren't fond of clothes, especially in the summer in the garden. And they'd go around, they'd go looking for drugs, and Eric could say to them, "You can look all you want, there's no drugs here, you don't have to worry." And they finally gave up on looking for drugs, but they'd come up for a cup of coffee. They just come up and visit. They liked talking to Eric and me and others. That's in the first few years. After that, they didn't bother us. I guess they believed us, checked us out. I know that we maybe were unusual. We actually had a sign on our door, on the side of our door. It said, no drugs allowed here. I don't remember how Eric wrote it. He did a calligraphed sign, and I was like, no drugs allowed in this premises.
Okay, cool. Did you find any, did you visit communities like in Nelson and other places? Did you come to town at all? Or?
We came to town all the time. I have a whole piece in my memoir about going to town. It was a very special thing, and the kids would, be like, I want to go down this time. I want to go this time. And we'd have a list a mile long, and the laundry. The laundry was quite a trip. Yeah, 12 loads, and Joan and I, usually it'd be Joan Smith and I would be, throwing clothes in the washer, then folding, and we have to get it all done in order to get back up the hill in time for the dark, because we had to get up it's about 2 miles, 3 miles, about that, to get back up the hill again in the winter particularly. It was tricky, and that meant that Rowdy had to be brought down in order to bring things up. But that was until we got Pogo, who was a Jeep. We had a very beloved Jeep that would go up and down the hill. there was a period of time where Rowdy would pull everything back up the hill, but he got very, very tired, and so we retired him down in the valley until he died. It's a very special horse. I grew to love him, even though I was scared at first. I was scared of a lot of things when I was I felt like I was just growing up, you know. I think you may not ask this question, I don't know, but I think, and it's part of my memoir, is I think that coming here and doing what I did really came out of my early experiences as a child. And I really see the relationship between those two things very strongly. And I won't go into that for the interview, but that was an important part of writing, was to discover the link between things that were happening within family, that I wanted a different kind of family that knew how to talk to each other and really loved each other. Like Joan and I, still, she's here in Nelson in a rest home. Every time I come to Nelson, I see her, because we still have stories to tell.
Still strong connections after all these years.
And that was the whole idea. In the new family, the intent was to learn how to be loving, even if you had disagreements, you know, learn how to be kind and work together. And also how to take care of yourself was really important. And that we teach our children that as well. Yeah.
Fantastic. Can you be able to speak about how the sort of counterculture movement affected people's attitudes towards the environment?
Hugely, yeah.
Okay.
Because suddenly we were in it. I mean, you can think I'm in the environment when you live in the city, but it's just not the same. You drive up a mountain, the mountain, and there on all sides is this what's alive. And the water is so alive, and you're growing plants, and you see how they grow, and you get, like, I got 100 chicks. The first time I ever had chicks, I ordered 100 chicks, and they were all in a box. They were in a box about this big, and they said they were going to be Rhodesian red. I think that was the name for them. And I expected them to be red, you know, in the box, but actually they were all just yellow. And I let them out. I made little things to keep them warm and watering, and we had a little chicken barn, and it was like a miracle to have 100 little chicks just peeping all around. I just loved it. We'd go down, let them out in the morning when they got bigger, learning how to go from little chickens to bigger ones to roosters who went into the cook pot, and how to go about doing butchering chickens that you knew you had raised and you were going to eat. We did the same thing with the steers that were born, because we couldn't keep them. And we did it in the most sacred way we could. We were really extremely aware of the gift that came in their growing. There was an important part of our ritual, was to make sure we had that the meat that we ate was cared for meaningfully before it was gone. It was very hard with the steers, because we had loved them very much. We did raise pigs once, maybe twice. That was not so good. I mean, we just fell in love with them completely. We didn't know what to do. And also, we didn't know how to go about doing it properly, I think, so. Anyway, a lot of stories. And I think you asked the question, you're really wondering about how do we see the environment. I think we were in awe of it. And we also felt that it was really important to honor it and make sure we were taking good care of the water and the trees and the plants, the animals. And when we were in the city, I don't think we knew what we were talking about. Now, maybe Michael and Joan probably did, but I hadn't lived with a farm. I grew up in Southern California, you know. My dad get a garden, so that's helpful, but yeah.
You mentioned before about the Vatican Hall. Were you involved in the process to build that at all? Was that?
I didn't do the building. I taught the students there various times.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
I was mostly interested in teaching them to read. For some reason, it's a little vague to me about just, I'd get together with a group of the kids that were interested in reading. Yeah. I'm very, my focus is on, you might say, literature and writing and reading. I'm sure I taught them how to do calligraphy. That's another proper writing. It's my father's thing. Yeah.
Are there any other effects of the counterculture movement you can see in the Kootenays today? So we obviously have, I think various legacies here. But are you able to see any that when you visit the Kootenays and think, oh yes, this is effect from the movement here in the late 60s, early 70s?
Women building their own houses. We have stewards on our property, I'm sure you know, and several of them are women who are incredibly capable, who have, and some of them are younger and have just taken the idea of having a piece of land where they could build and take care of their own family. And I'm always very impressed by that somehow. They're doing it pretty much on their own, and that's a lot to ask. What else here? What I was thinking is that there's so much caring for the water, and for the water to be protected, and the forest to be protected, but with an awareness now, even for us as new family and the Paradise Valley stewards, we're aware that the forest situation is really tenuous, and climate change has made various trees not do very well, and that we're preparing for really a big change. It's already in motion, but we knew that was happening even 10 years ago. And we're trying to prepare for that, and I can see that other people are making sense of that as well. But also I think there are way more gardens now than there were, that people are really wanting organic gardens. Oh, the other thing is that organic was an idea we had, you know, and we did organic gardening, but it's now become everywhere you go. The QFC in Seattle has organic food, you know, so it's become a big item that we thought, you know, I wonder if this will ever go forward, you know. Even specific foods are now part of the culture rather than just the counterculture. And the whole idea of midwifery and natural childbirth, and I was going to mention that my daughter, her stepmom was Ina May Gaskin, and so Dana was raised within that culture of midwifery being an important thing to provide for people who want it.
Yes, we've heard some stories of births going on, and it's been really quite interesting to hear. And yes, it's interesting about the organic farming. It was often seen as a bit of a different and marginal thing, and now it's sort of mainstream in many ways, isn't it? Okay, fantastic. Are there any other aspects of the sort of counterculture movement in the Kootenays that you were a part of? Anything else we haven't touched on there?
Creativity was a primary focus for me. Sometime in the early 70s, I realized that I really wanted to be a potter. And that had been a dream before we came up here, just as a faint dream. I had been to a few classes back in the States, and when I got here, must have been 73, I met Norman White. He's a good friend of ours, and he taught me how to make pots and also how to fire them. And he let me use his kiln, which the first time I used it was kind of a disaster, but I got better. It was one of those moments, again, that I have written about in the memoir. But I kept going, and then I started going to Christmas fairs, and mostly I did hand-built pots that I think I'm still known for. And then I met Maggie Cheer, who she may not be part of this counterculture, but I think maybe she should be. She's my dearest friend, one of my dearest friends, and she's a weaver, and she and I became the co-coordinators of the Kootenai Boundary Artisans Alliance. And we realized there were artists all over the place. They were every tree you could see, there'd be an artist behind it. And so we wrote, and I forgot to bring it. That would have been a wonderful book to bring you. Somehow, I'll see if I can get it to you. It might even be part of the Regional District Library. Kootenai Boundary Artisans Alliance did a book on the artists of the area. And it's, I'll find it for you. Yeah, if nothing more, I can find you a photo of it. Yeah. That it had a page for each one of us. So there was a page for Ron Woodward, who was a photographer, and Bruce Martin, and Eric Clough, and me, and Maggie, and it's quite a book, anyway. And it was paid for by the Regional District of the Kootenays. And I think creativity just burst into bloom after we'd all been here maybe 5-6 years. It was a natural inclination to want to celebrate the earth, you know. So I think that you can ask the question again. I may have gotten flowing off.
You're right on board there. This is sort of any sort of aspects that sort of, you know, that have come out of that movement, and we see here, you know, over more recent decades and continuing today and hopefully in the future. So yeah, we've certainly discovered this sort of link again to artists, from weaving to potters to architects, all sorts of different people who came out of that movement and have really made a legacy here.
The Weavers Guild, Judy Bradford, she taught me how to do Salish weaving. I had this amazing dream, and I didn't know what to do with it, and I went to see her, and she said, you have to make a Salish loom. I'm going, oh my God. But Eric made me a loom, and I did hand spinning and then dyeing natural dyes, and I made a big, wow, I could have brought that too. It was of a lizard that came in the dream, and it took me a year to make the rug. It's like a big rug, but it was all hand woven like this, not with a shuttle or anything, but it was that's what a Salish rug is made by twisting between the warp. It was like maybe an hour a day, just
And you learned that those sort of skills.
trying to honor the dream and also learn the skills. But she also taught us how to use a jack loom. That was really exciting. And she taught my daughter as well how to weave. And how to weave belts was also. And we did necklaces. We did beads. I mean, like we had huge bead collection. We would do beads even in the kerosene light, late at night. Yeah. It was a lot of doing together, which is part of teaching. Yeah. You're asking great questions. You're helping me remember. I'm feeling a lot of touched. Yeah.
So you made a lot of clothes, I imagine, for the group, and
I made an outfit for myself, but I wouldn't say we made. Oh, we did. We knitted all winter. We knitted mittens and gloves and big sweaters and socks, big heavy socks. Yeah. Mm-hmm. We felt very capable. I think that was really important, that we were making things. We were doing it together and teaching each other as we did it. It was a different world. We might have been on another planet, for all the difference. Yeah. I'm very, very glad we did what we did. I wouldn't change it. I think we could have been more conscious of our children. That's the one thing. I think we were so busy and we were working so hard and we were trying to do the land and grow the plants and build the houses, and there weren't enough of us. We didn't organize quite that way. You asked about people and jobs. Joan Bishop did the livestock. She took care of, not the chickens though. Chickens were mine. And she did Rowdy and the cows, took care of them, but we'd all milk. And I said Joan Smith and I were mostly the ones who were with the kids and in the household and becoming carpenters. Later on, Eric and I built the solar houses with Nancy in Nelson, in addition. So we built there are 2 solar houses in Nelson. You didn't know about that.
Where are they?
They're the road that comes up from I'll have to give you the address. Would that be good? Yeah? We sold both houses. But it was a difficult time. It was David Tuck University closed down right around that time, and we had sold one of the houses to one of the professors from the university. And that's around the time after that we left here and we had to move and go to Ontario, and we came back. It was a financial disaster.
So were you involved with Notre Dame and DTUC at all there?
It was DTUC that closed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And did you work for you took?
No.
No.
But Maggie did. She worked at Selkirk, my friend who was the Artisans Alliance, yeah.
Of course, there was the School of the Arts as well, wasn't there?
That was the art school too.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Can I ask about what was your favourite things about those times? Anything that you miss or don't miss to counter that?
Wow. I miss the house we built, the big house that we built later in the 70s. That was the most beautiful house. I miss the building of it. I miss my studio. I had a huge studio upstairs where I made the pots, vases. Anyway, miss having a kiln. I miss the quiet. Space, the trees, being surrounded by trees. Sense of family. I mean, I have family now, and my daughter lives quite close to me, which I'm fortunate, and my granddaughter. But there was a sense of complexity, maybe. But I think it was a big teaching, because then I became a therapist over these years, and I'm sure that I'm drawing on many of those experiences. What else do I miss? At the time, I worked all the time, so it wasn't like I had a lot of space and time. I still kind of don't, but I'm working on it. Trying to carve more time. What do I miss? Now I'm studying watercolor and collage, and so a whole part of my person was caught up in making clay. You'll see them, they're on the hard drive. I just thought that'd be helpful. That's part of my website, so you're welcome to look. I miss Eric. Yeah. Yeah.
And the chickens, I'm sure.
And the chickens, yes. And Bossy and Daisy, the cows, they were so loving.
And sort of last question really here. How do you think being part of the counterculture movement has affected your life?
I think I could have become an educator in university or in high school. And I turned a corner to do this. And I think I became a much more grounded, solid, confident human being as a teacher. Because I teach now. But at the time, I would have been learning from just books. And we moved to the Kootenays and I started building A-frames, I knew that I was a real person. And that I belonged on the land. No matter where I live, that I'm part of all that. So I think I draw on all those experiences. I share them with my clients, I share them with my family, things I remember. Yeah. Tell me the question again. What's the question again?
It's really is how do you think being part of the counterculture movement has affected your life?
It's helped me understand people. I think I could have had a very narrow life. That's it. A very narrow life. And that by being here, I was 20 years of living in the Kootenays. So all that period of time learning all different kinds of people, having to work things out with people, not just kind of, oh, well, it's just my neighbor. You know, like what it means to be neighborly and help people. And I'm still learning that, so, yeah.
Great. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think we're...
Are we done?
I think we are done. Thank you very much, Carol.
You're very welcome.